I've stood outside that gate for 11 years, 11 winters, 11 summers, and in all that time I never once saw a guard move. Not for rain, not for shouting, not for the drunk lad who sang at him for 40 minutes straight one Christmas Eve. Until that Tuesday in November. My name's Tom Halloway. I ran the little newspaper stand across from the east gate of Kingsham Palace, the one with the green awning that leaked in 3 places. My father ran it before me. I knew that gate the way you know a face. I knew which of the iron spikes had rust at the base. I knew that the 3rd railing rattled when a lorry went past. And I knew the guards. Not their names, you don't get names, but you learn the shapes of men. The tall one with the long neck, the one who blinked more than the others, the one who stood so still that tourists used to knock on the sentry box to check he was real. That November the weather was rotten, gray from morning to dark, that thin cold rain that doesn't fall so much as hang in the air. The cobbles went black with it. Kingsham's a fine palace when the sun's out. In the rain it just looks tired. Still the tourists came, they always come. That morning they were 3 deep along the barrier, coats zipped to the chin, phones held up above heads, filming a man in a red tunic doing absolutely nothing. Somewhere down the line, a woman was explaining to her son what a bearskin cap was, and the boy wasn't listening. He was watching a pigeon eat a crisp. I remember the smell. Wet wool and hot chestnuts from Ravi's cart on the corner. Ravi's been there longer than me. I remember the sound too, that low hum a crowd makes, and the traffic and somebody's radio crackling from a security van parked half on the pavement. But mostly, I remember the newspapers, because that was the morning they announced it. The Prince and Princess of Brelmont, Rowan and Isolde, though nobody outside the palace ever said their names plain like that, were leaving. Not a scandal, not a row. No affair, no money trouble, none of the things people whisper about, just a letter, 2 pages, signed by both of them. They were stepping back, moving out to the coast, raising their children somewhere with a garden and no cameras. I stacked 40 copies of that paper by 7:30 and sold every one by 9. You've never heard a crowd go quiet like that. It happens in waves. Somebody reads it out. The people behind them lean in. Then the ones behind those, and it spreads, this hush, moving back through the bodies until the whole street's just standing there in the rain, holding wet paper. An old man near my stand read it twice. Then he folded it very carefully, the way you'd fold something you were going to keep, and he put it inside his coat. Good for them, he said. Nobody had asked him. A woman behind him said, "It's a disgrace." And that was the day, really. That was the whole day in 2 sentences. I looked across at the gate. At the guard on the left post, the tall one, standing exactly as he'd stood 10 minutes before, when nobody knew anything. Rain running off the peak of his cap, rifle at his shoulder, eyes forward. He'd have read that letter before we did, I thought. He'd have known before any of us. And he stood there like it was Tuesday. Which it was. By 11 the crowd had doubled. Word travels through a city like water through cracks. The news vans came first, then the photographers, then everyone else. People who'd never given the palace a second thought came down on their lunch break just to look at the gate, just to be near it, as if standing on wet cobbles would tell them something. The barriers weren't built for it. They're those metal ones linked together, the sort you see at a marathon. Good enough for a normal morning. That morning wasn't normal. I could see it going wrong before it went wrong. You get a feel for a crowd when you've watched them from the same spot for a decade. The good ones breathe. They shuffle, they make room. This one had stopped breathing. It had gone solid, shoulder against shoulder, and at the front the metal was starting to bow. There was an old woman near the middle of it. Mrs. Deacon, I only learned her name after from the paper. Gray coat, plastic rain hood, the kind my mother used to keep folded in her handbag. She had a little girl with her. 6, maybe 7. Red Wellingtons. The girl had a toy. One of those knitted bears with a ribbon at the neck. She kept holding it up, showing it to the guard. He didn't look, of course he didn't, that's the job. But I watched that girl for 10 minutes and she never got bored of trying. Every time the crowd pushed, she got shoved forward. And every time she got shoved forward, she held the bear a bit higher, like she was determined that this soldier was going to see her bear before she went home. Then the shouting started at the back. A photographer, I think. A big fellow with 2 cameras round his neck and a stepladder under his arm, forcing a path through where there wasn't one. I saw the ladder go up over the heads. I saw the shape of the crowd change, that ugly ripple that runs forward when someone pushes from behind. Ravi shouted something, I don't know what. The barrier on the left didn't fall so much as fold. The bottom of it kicked out and the top came down, and 30 people who'd been leaning on it suddenly had nothing to lean on. Mrs. Deacon went down first. The girl went with her. And I've thought about the next 4 seconds every day since. Because a crowd doesn't stop. It can't. The people at the back can't see. They keep coming. And there was a little girl in red Wellingtons on the cobbles with feet all around her and a knitted bear about a yard from her hand. I was shouting. I know I was shouting because my voice was gone by the afternoon. 2 policemen were fighting their way in from the corner, 20 feet away. Might as well have been a mile. And then I heard it. Boots. Not 1 step, 3, sharp and heavy and coming fast on wet stone, and everybody heard it because it was a sound that didn't belong. The guard doesn't move. The guard never moves. That's the whole point of him. He'd come off the post. He didn't run, that's the strange thing. Later, when everyone was telling it in the pub, they said he ran. He didn't. He crossed that ground at a march, quick and square, rifle up out of the way in one hand, and he went straight into the gap where the barrier had been. Then he planted himself. Turned side on, feet apart, shoulder into the crowd, and he stopped them. I don't know how to explain what that looked like. A man in a red tunic and a black cap, soaked through, holding back 40 people with his body while a stranger's grandmother lay behind his boots. Somebody's elbow caught his face. His cap went crooked. He didn't touch it. Back, he said, just that. Not loud. But there's loud and there's a voice that's been trained to be obeyed. And the front row heard it and stopped dead. And the ones behind them piled into their backs and then they stopped too. The whole street went still. He held it maybe 15 seconds. It felt like an hour. Then the police were in beside him and the pressure went out of it, the way air goes out of a thing. He knelt down, got Mrs. Deacon sitting up, said something to her nobody else heard. Her rain hood had come off and her hair was flat and wet, and she was patting his arm and saying sorry, 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 which is what people do when it isn't their fault at all. The girl was already up, scraped hands, not crying, that furious not crying children do when they're deciding whether to. The guard picked up the bear. It was filthy, cobble muck all over the ribbon. He brushed it on his sleeve twice, made it worse, and gave up. Then he held it out to her. She took it, and she looked up at him and said, dead serious, you saw him. And that man, soaked, bleeding a bit at the eyebrow, in front of 900 phones, gave her a nod. Then he stood, straightened his cap, and marched back to his post. Boots turned, rifle up, eyes forward. Like nothing had happened at all. Nobody clapped. That's what I'll never forget. 900 people and not one clap. They just watched him go back to standing still. The papers ran it the next morning, but not on the front. The front was still the prince and princess. Their letter, their coast, their garden. Everyone had an opinion. Half the country thought they'd abandoned something. Half thought they'd saved something. Page 7 had the guard, Corporal Ives, they said, 4 years in. Reprimanded technically for leaving his post. Nothing came of it. I saw him again 3 weeks later, back on the left gate, standing in the sleet while a stag party sang at him. Didn't blink. And I stood behind my stand with my thermos, and I thought about that letter. about two people giving up a palace so their children could grow up out of the frame. Everyone kept asking, why would anyone walk away from all this? I don't know, I never met them. But I know what I saw at that gate. A man whose entire job was to stand still, and the one moment he chose not to. People remember the day a prince walked away from a palace. I remember the day a guard walked away from his line. Somehow, I think it was the same thing.